Warning, the following podcast episode discusses school shootings. We acknowledge this episode is potentially distressing and it can evoke strong emotions and trigger traumatic experiences in some listeners. If you find yourself overwhelmed or distressed during this episode, we recommend pausing or discontinuing listening and seeking support from a mental health professional and trusted individual or helpline. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in to our second part of deep diving into school shootings and mental health. On our first part, we had Claudia Sotelo discussing what compassion fatigue is. And now for the second part.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, Claudia, is like, I'm a parent. And so as a parent, sometimes we set our own goals or think that we're alone, right, in the situation. And now we have to, especially as moms, that we have to carry it all. We're the spine of the family and we have to do it all and take care of it all. So that's really important right there. Yes, the parents get exhausted. Yes, this is true. It even becomes numbing. It even becomes numbing as, okay, like dad sounds almost like robotic, like, okay, last time we did 1 2 3, so let's do 1 2 3 again, right? But it's not necessarily, we can't say how could he blah blah blah, because after a while you do get numb. You get numb. But one thing that's really important to remember is that that's why programs like MyCHN are even developed and created in the first place. Because you're not alone. And yes, you need respite. You need respite from this. And yes, there are points where even if you're a professional, like even myself as a counselor, look for assistance from other professionals because we can't counsel our own family. We can't, because they're our family and we're going to be kind of crossing over lines. So we all need that support. And that's the point here. Yes, it's exhausting. But no one is saying you have to bear it all alone. This is why we have these teams and we have multidisciplinary teams, to support you and kind of catch you in those safety nets. But definitely, this is why we have these programs, to reach out.
Okay, so my other question would be, I used to be a child that would get mad really easily, but I kind of outgrew that. So, at what point is it just like hormones? Like, at what point is it just like she's growing, puberty, hormones, and at what point is it like, hey, we need professional help here?
Well, I go back to what I learned in college, and it's like anytime that what you're dealing with is interfering with your daily life functioning, you might want to take some you might want to look into it because it's impacting the way you're living your life. Because you're very right, Mariela. And that's the thing I feel too. Now it's like, oh, I'm anxious. It's such a bad thing. Guess what? We're human and we all feel the feels. It is absolutely normal to feel stressed over a test that you're going to have. It's absolutely normal to feel a little bit anxious if you're starting a new school. It's absolutely normal to feel a little bit of sadness or when your friend makes a poor choice and you argue and you feel rejected. That's part of life, number one. But number two, it's like, but how are we coping? What are we doing to deal with that? And if we're unable to cope in a healthy way, then we need some support in learning healthy coping mechanisms. Because if I'm stressed and I'm anxious and I'm depending on a substance, an altered substance to relax me, yeah, it may relax me and that's what my peers are doing, but it doesn't make it right. And it doesn't make it appropriate if you're having, if mama says it's not okay, if it's illegal, and if I'm having trouble functioning in school because I'm so dependent on that. Because there needs to be I think, accountability piece too. What am I doing to help myself first? And so that's where I see a huge gap. where we're losing that accountability piece. What can you do? Because what we do have in this world is everybody has a choice. And yes, our choices may be different based on where we're at in our lives. If I'm a minor that's living under the roof of my mom and dad, I may be limited in some of my choices, but guess what? I still have the choice to make a positive choice. I can still, if I am so angry about a situation, I can take some time to step aside and take some deep breathing. I can do some deep breathing. If I can make a choice to, if my mom offers to take me to therapy, I can show up with an open mind and be receptive and participate. I have choice. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and just normalizing it's okay. It's okay to not be okay.
I kind of
Yeah.
want to piggyback off of what you were saying about being responsible and about thinking about how it influences other people. I was thinking, like, doesn't that kind of perhaps a cultural difference? Because here in America, we're all about individualism. We're all about me, 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 and it's engraved in us from birth. And maybe Mariella can help on this since she used to be from another country too. Like, even in pop culture, we glorify vigilantes, Batman and stuff. I don't want to blame them because they're made up characters, but the idea of getting revenge is sometimes, I guess, glorified in the media, sometimes in pop culture and movies. And I think that just goes back to individualism and how it's all about, you hurt me, I got to hurt you back. You think that plays a huge impact compared to other countries? Because I know a lot of these mass shootings, they're very popular here. You don't hear that much over there.
Yeah, I think it's multiple factors. Like Claudia was also talking about the social media. Yes, our world here in the US is distinct. We are very, very focused on what's happening in the world online. However, one of the things that I've noticed big time is early exposure to violence, early exposure to sexual misconduct, things like that. So what I mean by that is a 6-year-old playing a video game like Grand Theft Auto, where you kill the cop and you pick up the prostitute, right? Or maybe some other shooting games. They're not appropriate for certain ages. Or why does a 3-year-old need to watch the movie It? Why are 6 year olds watching Chucky and those kind of things? So I know that we have different perspectives because, like we were saying, sometimes we want to raise our kids the way we were raised. And oh, well, I watched that when I was young and look, I'm fine, right? So yes, this is true, but we never know when it's not going to be fine. So it actually increases promiscuity if you present sexual things too early also, and then in the video games people are now being seen as objects versus people, so the compassion, the empathy is being disconnected. And so then you add social media in there, and so there really is no compassion or empathy or emotional connected to other human beings. They become objects. And I think that that's where we are so honed in on these electronics that we don't think about that. But yes, I mean, the easiest way is for you to just go to like IMDb sites or something and look up, why is this rated this? Why is this rated that? And if you're okay with that. So too soon, exposure to these things too soon can start creating this image that people are not people. They're objects. They're not people with families who are other human beings. They're this little image from a video game, and I'm gonna go in and just blow everyone up, right? So I think that's a big thing. Yes.
Yeah, I would also say that brings up a good point about maybe perhaps parenting. Because sometimes parents just give their kids a phone because they don't want to deal with them. I mean, that's very, very common. I see that all the time. And, with YouTube and all the things they can do, and then they buy them video games, so they'll play that instead of, disrupting them, instead of spending time with them. I really feel like parenting itself has really gone down quite a bit. And I don't necessarily know the cause of that. To me, it just seems like they don't want to deal with their kids. For me, I've seen that a lot. And then it is weird when you go to like an elementary school and you see a bunch of young kids for Halloween dressing up as the Squid Games, characters. And it's like, how did you watch
Oh, I
that,
know,
man?
I know. Well, on that particular one, that's another thing is that sometimes Netflix or those other programs can be a little bit sneaky about entering, putting things in there or that kind of stuff where the images look friendly, but then they click on it and it's violent, but now they're hooked. So they're watching it. But when it comes to parenting, there you definitely impact positively or negatively. And I think that one of the things that we do the most, like you were saying, is kind of like pushing them off, right? Because I had a long day and I have all this other stuff. And then here you come and I just can't take it. So whatever you have to tell me, I'm just going to dismiss it.
Doesn't that
And
go back into individualism then? Because then it's like all
yep,
about you in a sense. So that's just like this cultural thing we have where we don't really think about other people. We're just thinking about us. We're not thinking about how our actions could affect,
yeah,
our
yeah,
parents or even
very
our
good
kids in
point.
the future.
For
Well, and I
Another
sure.
think that goes back to like making sure that we're checking our own mental health and that we're checking ourselves and we're working through our own issues. Um, because life happens, right? Somebody's, they grew up in this situation and they didn't deal with their trauma and they're living the effects of it. And then now there's a child in the picture and now there's an additional stressor. And yes, I think our culture is very like go out and get yours. There is a part to that too, but I think there's a lack of whether it's intentional or unintentional. But as a parent, you have to create space to be present in that child's life. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That child is dependent on you. They belong to you. You created them.
Mhm.
And there needs to be an intentionality for I'm going to create a space for you.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? And we find and what I've seen and what I've heard is that basically, I mean, two basic functions is people want to be seen and they want to be heard. Hey mom, do you see me? I'm here. And I'm creating a space where yes, I'm washing the dishes and because I'm washing the dishes, I'm trying to prep for dinner and this and that. But you know what, sweetheart? Come join me. Come help mama wash the dishes. Or hey, give me 10 minutes and
Yeah.
let's sit down and have dinner together.
Yeah.
Let's create a
Quality
space where
versus
when I'm picking
quantity.
you up, yeah, we're having conversation. And because we're so caught up in our own world, we sometimes make that mistake. And
Yeah.
so I think that's something that we need to be more present in the lives of our children. And also in going back to individualistic, the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. And it truly
Yep.
does. It truly does. It's multiple people in the community. And like Anna said earlier, receive the help. Be willing. There is help out there and there is nothing wrong with asking for it. Sometimes too, when my parents come in and they want to be here and they want to be, and that's great. But we also need to create a space to, hey, you're coming here because you need support. Trust my judgment. Trust my training. Trust the process. Trust what we're doing here and be committed to it.
Right.
Um, and
I
so
think
I
I
think
agree
that's
with
a
you,
piece.
Claudia, with the quality versus the quantity of the time for the kids. You can say, "Oh, I've been with them all day." Okay, but what have you really done? Being in the same room is not the same. They'd probably get more out of you out of 30 minutes of undivided attention versus all day of you doing other things next to them, right? So the quality versus the quantity for sure. But I think that you're right. A lot of times parents have a lot of their own unresolved issues and their own anxieties and their own things due rub off on the kids. But I think that's where the hardest part is, accepting that you can't do it alone. Once you kind of get over that hump, everything else falls into place.
Think about what the security was in your schools. Because I could tell you, I went to very poor schools here in Houston, and we had metal detectors. We had like the thing that you go to like the airport security to see if you had some kind of metal. You had to take off your belt. You had to take off your shoes to go into intermediate, middle school, and high school. But when you see these shootings, they don't have any of that. They happen in like very, middle income, higher middle income. You see the shooting. What do you guys think about that? Like, I think the security should be like uniform for all
Yeah.
everyone.
Well, I mean, it's hard to answer that in the sense that, yes, let's go hard and let's prevent it. But then what kind of experience are we creating for our children where that's the norm? Why does that have to be the norm? And if it's needed, it's needed, but you can, so where as a society are we placing our government funds? Because I can tell you that in the schools, we are so limited. They are so limited to where those funds are going and how they're receiving, and where are we as a society placing our importance. So there's also a lack there. It's not that they don't want to, but how? If I'm a principal at a school and I'm seeing and I'm advocating and I'm advocating and I'm asking for help, and the school board is trying to, but where is the money coming from? Where are we, how can we create this? Because we did, I can tell you that in the like the 15 years when I first started in the school system as a substitute, and up to a year ago where I walked out, left education for, I could see a change in that, in the way we as a faculty functioned. you know Back, we did, lockdowns was a new thing. Now we have to practice lockdown, shelter in place, and what do we do and how do we do it here and there, and and it even changed from, we were training to just hide and lock the door, to the other treatment was, let's, if we're in a situation, how do we fight to get out? What are some Why are we having to do that? We're teachers. I'm not trained to be a squat person. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to
I
be in
heard
the
of
police department.
I've heard of states trying to give the teachers like firearms for them to train too. And I
Okay.
was like, that's not what they signed up for. That's not
Yeah.
at all.
Talking about the funding and stuff, I think the money needs to go into mental health, the source of the issue. I think it's the people's mental health that is not being addressed or taken care of that's leading to these things. Um, and I know people beg to differ, with the against gun violence and again, no guns and all that. But I believe that people kill people, uh, you know? And so I think that when the money goes into the mental health, like really truly go into mental health, I think people are waking up a little bit more and being more aware that this is a huge issue, and it's going in. But going back to what you were saying, Mariela, about the rural areas and the areas that are different, I think that, like, for instance, in Haley's case, she was dealing with transgender and trying to be accepted in her family. And because in Nashville, the smaller community where she was from, and then more rural, that's another thing. They're not as open as they are in the city. Like here in Houston, we have, our fabulous Montrose area with our, even rainbows painted on our roads and stuff. We love our community and we let them know it. And so I think that in the rural areas, there's not as much of that. And then you play in religion, and now it's really taboo to bring up things like, that don't fit the norm in the rural areas. Yeah, I was surprised that when I was looking at the statistics on anami.org was that the lesbian, gay, and bisexual is 54.3% higher mental illness than any other in rural areas. So that tells me that they're not really being supported as much as they are in the inner cities. And that's a big thing too. We need to give our community that support, money into mental health. I know that here in the southern districts, they started putting bulletproof glass, and people have to get buzzed into the rooms and things like that. And I do hear anxiety rising, like kids that maybe didn't have issues is now going up because of the shootings, because they have to now, even practicing these drills is making them nervous. So definitely things have definitely changed, but I think the money needs to go straight to the source of mental
Yeah.
illness.
There's even bulletproof backpacks now. It's
Oh, scary.
yeah. And
I've seen those.
yeah, for example, I remember when I was in high school, it was, and you're right. I think the money needs to go into, therapy, getting counseling, because it was sometimes I felt like, yes, don't get me wrong, the kids did something bad, like fighting, or, they caught them with drugs or something. And it was straight to, you're going to the alternate school. Yeah.
But at alternate schools, they're just surrounded by people that are kind of more like them. And so then it gets into the point of, is it like prison where, most of the time you come out even worse than when you went in?
Yeah, so
Um,
I actually worked at an alternative campus. And so it is a different culture. And so the idea is to, I mean, one of the things that the district that I was at, they were intentional about placing me there. And my position was a student support counselor. So I don't know if you know the roles of the counselors. Typically, you have what we've always had is an academic counselor. And, at the high school, they're swamped with having to do pretty much clerical stuff, like, well, building, making sure that credits, building schedules, making sure credits are in place. And so they do have the mental health training, but they need help. They need support. And so like this student support counselor is fairly new and some people call it a crisis counselor. It's a response because there has been a change in, the requirements of schools, but then where comes the support? And yes, when the idea of setting somebody to an alternative campus is that it is a consequence for a decision that you made. And, the school is doing the best that they can to create natural consequences. But there also needs to be some support from the family that supports that. And we're not challenging that. And so we did see a lot of that where we're not accepting of the consequence and we're challenging that. And then, yes, you come to this alternative setting and the school is functioning in a different way where, yes, we can't help it. Everybody was sent here because they breached the code of conduct. But just because you're here doesn't mean that you're a bad person. I used to hate it all the time. Oh, you teach at that school with those kids that have problems. Newsflash, we all have problems. These kids just got caught. They got caught up. So it's also debunking that, and anybody, I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I was making wrong choices. I don't think anybody in this world has not made a bad decision or a bad choice. And so, yes, they are exposed, and yeah, you do see it's more prevalent in an alternative campus, but then it comes to like, where is the support? I feel like in our education system needs more support. Instead of getting on TV and ranting about gun violence and gun laws, okay, yes, let's do that, but let's get as a community, let's be a village, and let's invest in our children, in our future.
And get to the source of where all of that is coming from. You can't put a Band-Aid on a broken arm. You have to get to the source of what's really getting our kids like this. And that's where the mental health and the counseling and the support comes in. But yeah, Claudia, I completely see what you're saying. Now, what about this other side though? We have families that just aren't supportive, and that's the problem in itself, right? So then that's where sometimes we become the kids' family, or they go into gangs because that is now their family, right? They're getting that love and support that they don't get. And so sometimes we come into these bigger barriers for sure. But I think that it always comes down to the source of where it's coming from. How can
Yeah,
we
and
help them?
I agree on that. One of the things that I can say as an educator is that we felt a lot of, I can't speak for everybody, but one feeling was that more and more pressure was being placed on the school, on the teachers. Look at all the, I mean, it's part of the duty, but now we're having to train our staff on how to respond, and they expect us to do all these things that I'm a teacher. Let me focus on teaching. Let me do what I do. Let me stay in my lane and go hard. And if you see that there's a need for more, let's let's look at what we can do to help support our educators in their world, because that's where all our kids are going. That's where we can catch, that's where we can fill in the gaps, and that's where we can catch them and change and help change the course of their future. But like Anna said, what we're seeing is a lot of resistance because we don't agree with what's happening, and it's a team effort. And one thing that I would, encourage, our parents to do is connect in with the community. You're like Anna said, you don't have to carry this burden alone. Get to know your sons or daughters' teachers, get to know the principals, get to know the counselors, get to know the community. If your kid is involved, get them involved elsewhere, in sports, and be part of the process and trust the process. And,
The big
just like in
one.
everything, you have
Too much
people that,
idle time.
yeah, and I'm not gonna say, people do have negative experiences with educators or counselors or principals or whatever it may be, but have an open mind and be willing to work through that and ask for help. That's one thing that I'm doing here too, and I'm educating our parents that are coming here how to get connected in with their school, because it has to be all connected. We can do all the things in therapy, but if you're not doing the things at home, then we're not working together. So we all need to be connected in uniform, in that we're all on that same path to support the child and make sure the child, and it's work. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's not impossible.
Now that you bring that up, that's a really good point, because it does seem like it's like the families against the teachers, right? Or the principals. But we should probably be joining for sure as a team. Now, however, when I kind of hear some of the things that the kids say that occurs at school, and it becomes a little bit cyclical, like the teachers are worn out, so they take it out on the kids, and then the kids will then feel bad about themselves, and then they go into the house to all of this other chaos, and then it's just a big circle. So you know, where's the balance? Where do we keep our teachers sane, our kids healthy, and our families responding?
Yeah, and part of my position in the schools was to support the staff as well, to create outlets for self-care. And so there needs to be more of that to help. There's so much that needs to go into um, the preventative piece. Let's be more preventative instead of reactive. If we can be more preventative, then we can change the course, and so that way we don't have to be reactive.
So I would like to thank both of you. This was great. You guys will definitely be invited, you guys, for any other podcast. And if you want to book a visit with either Claudia or Anna or any of our other amazing counselors, please go to www.mychn.org or call us at 281-824-1480. We accept anything from private insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP. And if you don't have insurance, hey, we work with everyone. We accept everyone. So Don't forget to demonstrate your love by sharing this podcast with your friends, family, or giving us a review on Spotify and iTunes. Until next time.